Hi everyone, this is Ruchi Kulkarni. Today we are going to do the chapter Footprints Without Feet, written by H.G. Wells from your class 10 book Footprints Without Feet. How exciting it would be if we had a way to be invisible. We would have done whatever we wanted. But what would you do? Would you enjoy doing unimaginable things? Or would you misuse your new ability and irritate people like Griffin did? Griffin was a brilliant scientist who degenerated himself into a lawless person. He discovered that the human body could become transparent and invisible. He misused his great discovery to threaten, trouble, and beat innocent persons and rob them. But this newfound discovery didn't prove very pleasurable to him. What happened to him? Let's find out by reading and understanding the story, followed by significance of the title, moral, summary, and question answers. This story is written by H.G. Wells, and before reading the story, let's know about the author first. Herbert George Wells is an English writer born on 21st September 1866 in London, UK. He was prolific in many genres. He wrote dozens of novels, short stories, works of social commentary, history, satire, biography, and autobiography. His famous short stories are The Country of the Blind, The Red Room, The Star, Empire of the Ants, The Cone, The Diamond Maker, and many more. Wells is now best remembered for his science fiction novels and is often called the father of science fiction, along with Jules Verne and the publisher Hugo Gernsback. He died on 13th August 1946 in London at the age of 79. Can a man become invisible? This is the story of a scientist who discovers how to make himself invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? Let's try to understand and know the answers to these questions after reading the story. The two boys started in surprise at the fresh muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. Imprints means prints, and bare feet means feet without footwear. What was a barefooted man doing on the steps of a house in the middle of London? And where was the man? As they gazed, a remarkable sight met their eyes. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. Further footprints followed, one after another, descending the steps and progressing down the street. Descending means coming down. The boys followed, fascinated, until the muddy impressions became fainter and fainter and at last disappeared altogether. Fascinated means impressed or attracted. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. The bewildered boys had been following a scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. Bewildered means confused. Griffin, the scientist, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. Finally, he swallowed certain rare drugs and his body became as transparent as a sheet of glass, though it also remained as solid as glass. Brilliant scientist though he was, Griffin was rather a lawless person. Lawless means a person who does not follow law and order. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. Eject means forced to leave. In revenge, Griffin set fire to the house. To get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes. Thus, it was he became a homeless wanderer, without clothes, without money, and quite invisible, until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. The story started with the scene when two unknown boys were surprised to see imprints or prints of feet. They saw the footprints of a barefooted man, that is, a man who wasn't wearing any shoes. And one after the other, more footprints followed as the man was descending the steps. But no one could see that man. The boys could only see those muddy footprints, which became fainter as the man started to walk ahead. Who could explain this mystery? But it was simple. There was a scientist whose name was Griffin who was carrying out an experiment to prove that human body could become invisible. And so finally one day he swallowed certain rare medicines which made his body as transparent as glass, but the body was solid. It was as solid as glass. Griffin was a brilliant scientist, but he never followed any law and order. His landlord, that is the house where Griffin was living on rent, his landlord disliked him and wanted him to leave. So, in order to take revenge, Griffin set fire to that house. And to run away from there, he removed his clothes so that he will not be seen. And now was the status that Griffin was homeless, he was without clothes, without money, and he was wandering on the streets. In short, Griffin was now an invisible man. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London, but his adventures were by no means over. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander about London without clothes. It was midwinter. The air was bitterly cold, and he could not do without clothes. Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. Closing time arrived, and as soon as the doors were shut, Griffin was able to give himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. He broke open boxes and wrappers and fitted himself out with warm clothes. Soon, with shoes, an overcoat, and a wide brimmed hat, he became a fully dressed and visible person. In the kitchen of the restaurant, he found cold meat and coffee, and he followed up the meal with sweets and wine taken from the grocery store. Finally, he settled down to sleep on a pile of quilts. Quilt is a blanket. At the beginning of the story, we came to know that two boys were following Griffin because Griffin was an invisible man. While the boys did not understand how those footprints appeared on the floor or on the ground, they wanted to follow him. But finally, Griffin was able to escape from those boys. It was in London, and the season then was midwinter. It was very cold. Griffin was without clothes because to be invisible, he should not wear clothes. For a long time, he walked about on the streets and then he entered a London store to make himself warm. When the store got closed, Griffin opened a few boxes of clothes. He wore some shoes, an overcoat, a wide brimmed hat, and now he seemed like a fully dressed, visible person. Though his body was invisible, but the clothes that he wore were visible, and that made him look like a normal person. After that, he went to the kitchen of a restaurant and he had some cold meat and coffee. And finally, he had some sweets and wine which he took from a grocery store. When it was time to sleep, he piled up all the blankets and slept on them. If only Griffin had managed to wake up in good time, all might have been well. As it was, he did not wake up until the assistants were already arriving next morning. When he saw a couple of them approaching, he panicked and began to run. Panicked means got scared. They naturally gave chase. In the end, he was able to escape only by quickly taking off his newly found clothes. So once more, he found himself invisible but naked in the chill January air. This time he decided to try the stock of a theatrical company in the hope of finding not only clothes but also something that would hide the empty space above his shoulders. Empty space above his shoulders refers here to the face part which was now invisible. Shivering with cold, he hurried to Drury Lane, the center of the theatre world. He soon found a suitable shop. He made his way invisible upstairs and came out a little later wearing bandages round his forehead, dark glasses, false nose, big bushy side whiskers, and a large hat. To escape without being seen, he callously attacked the shopkeeper from behind, after which he robbed him of all the money he could find. Callously means unfeelingly. So Griffin slept in a store that night. By the time he woke up, people of the shop or assistants had already arrived. When Griffin saw those people, he panicked, he got scared, and he started to run. When he started to run, the others started to chase him. So once more, he had to take off his clothes to become invisible. It was chill January air, it was very cold. At this point of time, he decided that he'll go to a shop of a theatrical company where he can get some clothes and some more things with the help of which he can hide his invisible face as well. So there was this Drury Lane where it was the center of the theatre world. He was shivering. He went there in a shop. When he went there, he was invisible. He went upstairs. But when he came out, he was completely changed. He was wearing bandages around his forehead. He wore dark glasses, a false nose, side whiskers, and a large hat. And to escape from there, so that the shopkeeper doesn't see him, he attacked the shopkeeper and robbed the money of that shop. Eager to get away from crowded London, he took a train to the village of Iping, where he booked 2 rooms at the local inn. Inn is a house providing accommodation, food, and drink to travelers. The arrival of a stranger at an inn in winter was in any case an unusual event. A stranger of such uncommon appearance set all tongues wagging. Tongues wagging means people started to talk or gossip. Mrs. Hall, the landlord's wife, made every effort to be friendly, but Griffin had no desire to talk and told her, "My reason for coming to Iping is a desire for solitude. Solitude means loneliness. I do not wish to be disturbed in my work. Besides, an accident has affected my face." Satisfied that her guest was an eccentric scientist, eccentric means strange, and in view of the fact that he had paid her in advance, Mrs. Hall was prepared to excuse his strange habits and irritable temper. Irritable temper means an angry mood. But the stolen money did not last long, and presently Griffin had to admit that he had no more ready cash. He pretended, however, that he was expecting a check to arrive at any moment. Shortly thereafter, a curious episode occurred. Very early in the morning, a clergyman and his wife were awakened by noises in the study. Clergyman is a priest or churchman. Creeping downstairs, they heard the chink of money being taken from the clergyman's desk. Chink is a sound. Without making any noise and with a poker grasped firmly in his hand, the clergyman flung open the door. "Surrender," he said. Poker is a metal rod with handle, and grasped means held. Griffin left London and he went to a village called Iping. At that time of the year, that is in winter season, any traveller was unexpected there. But he booked 2 rooms at a local inn. The landlord's wife, Mrs. Hall, tried to be very friendly with him, but Griffin was not interested. He told her a lie that he had met with an accident and that is why he was wearing those bandages. And that's the reason why he wanted to be left alone and did not wish to talk to anyone. Mrs. Hall was satisfied because she had already got the money in advance. And also she found it a bit strange because Griffin had a very irritable temper, that is, he was always in angry mood and he had some strange habits. But very soon, Griffin's money was all finished, and now he wanted more cash. So, very soon, he went to a clergyman or a churchman's house and he started to make noises in their study room. When the clergyman and his wife awoke, they went to the room with a big rod with a handle in order to hit the burglar. They thought that some thief had come there to rob of their money. Then, to his amazement, he realized that the room appeared to be empty. He and his wife looked under the desk and behind the curtains and even up the chimney. There wasn't a sign of anybody. Yet the desk had been opened and the housekeeping money was missing. Extraordinary affair, the clergyman kept saying for the rest of the day. But it was not as extraordinary as the behavior of Mrs. Hall's furniture a little later that morning. The landlord and his wife were up very early and were surprised to see the scientist's door wide open. Usually it was shut and locked, and he was furious if anyone entered his room. The opportunity seemed too good to be missed. They peeped around the door, saw nobody, and decided to investigate. The bedclothes were cold, showing that the scientist must have been up for some time. And stranger still, the clothes and bandages that he always wore were lying about the room. All of a sudden, Mrs. Hall heard a sniff close to her ear. A moment later, the hat on the bedpost leapt up and dashed itself into her face. Then the bedroom chair became alive. Springing into the air, it charged straight at her, legs foremost. As she and her husband turned away in terror, the extraordinary chair pushed them both out of the room and then appeared to slam and lock the door after them. When the clergyman entered his study room, he found no one there, but the drawer was open and the money was missing. A little later that morning, the landlord and his wife, that is Mr. and Mrs. Hall, woke up early and they were surprised to see Griffin's room's door opened. Generally, it used to be shut and locked because Griffin used to get very furious whenever anyone entered the room. So, this was the opportunity when the landlord and his wife could go in and take a look at it. So, when they went there, they saw that the bedclothes, that is, the bed cover or the blanket, were all cold, which means the scientist, that is, Griffin, must have been up for some time. And then they saw Griffin's clothes and bandages lying there. So, as they were looking about in the room, suddenly there was a noise. A hat which was kept on the bed just flew into Mrs. Hall's face, and then there was this chair which sprung into the air and it charged with legs ahead at her. It was as if somebody was attacking with the chair, but no one could see the man. Obviously, it was Griffin. He was invisible since he had taken off his clothes, and the landlord and his wife could not see him. So, both of them immediately went out of the room, after which Griffin slammed the door and locked from inside. Mrs. Hall almost fell down the stairs in hysterics. Hysterics means wild emotional reaction. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and that the stranger had somehow caused these to enter into her furniture. My poor mother used to sit in that chair, she moaned. To think it should rise up against me now. The feeling among the neighbors was that the trouble was caused by witchcraft. Witchcraft means black magic. But witchcraft or not, when news of the burglary at the clergyman's home became known, the strange scientist was strongly suspected of having had a hand in it. Suspicion grew even stronger when he suddenly produced some ready cash, though he had admitted not long before that he had no money. The village constable was secretly sent for. Sent for means called. Instead of waiting for the constable, Mrs. Hall went to the scientist, who had somehow mysteriously appeared from his empty bedroom. I want to know what you have been doing to my chair upstairs, she demanded. And I want to know how it is you came out of an empty room and how you entered a locked room. After that attack, Mrs. Hall fell down the stairs. She was giving very wild emotional reaction, and she was convinced that there were some ghosts or spirits in that room. Otherwise, the furniture wouldn't move. And it was the same chair on which her poor dead mother used to sit. When this news spread to the neighbors, people thought that it was black magic or it was witchcraft, and they thought that the burglary at the clergyman's home was also related to this. When just some time back Griffin had told them that he was out of cash and he would give a check, and now instantaneously he could produce real cash. People started to suspect Griffin that the theft at clergyman's house must have been done by him. Another reason for that suspicion was that Mrs. Hall couldn't understand how Griffin went inside a locked room and how he came out of that empty room. When things were out of the hands, the villagers thought of calling the constable to investigate the matter. The scientist was always quick tempered. Now he became furious. Furious means angry. You don't understand who or what I am, he shouted. Very well, I will show you. Suddenly he threw off bandages, whiskers, spectacles, and even nose. It took him only a minute to do this. The horrified people in the bar found themselves staring at a headless man. Horrified means scared. Mr. Jaffers, the constable, now arrived and was quite surprised to find that he had to arrest a man without head. But Jaffers was not easily prevented from doing his duty. If a magistrate's warrant ordered a person's arrest, then that person had to be arrested with or without his head. There followed a remarkable scene as the policeman tried to get hold of a man who was becoming more and more invisible as he threw off one garment after another. Finally, a shirt flew into the air, and the constable found himself struggling with someone he could not see at all. Some people tried to help him, but found themselves hit by blows that seemed to come from nowhere. In the end, Jaffers was knocked unconscious as he made a last attempt to hold on to the unseen scientist. Knocked means hit. There were nervous, excited cries of, "Hold him!" But this was easier said than done. Griffin had shaken himself free, and no one knew where to lay hands on him. Griffin was always an angry person, so when he saw that there was so much of commotion or there was so much of scare amongst the villagers, he wanted to show them who he was. He started taking off his clothes one by one. When people saw him, they got scared. They thought that it was a headless man. And soon the constable, whose name was Mr. Jaffers, arrived there. Mr. Jaffers could not hold back himself from arresting this man. Whether this man was with head or without head, it was his duty to arrest him. When finally Griffin took out his shirt, he was completely invisible. The constable tried to catch him, but he could not catch hold of him. Some people even tried to help the constable, but Griffin started to kick or push people or hit them. And at the end, even Jaffers was hit by Griffin. And no one knew where and how to catch Griffins. He had escaped. The title Footprints Without Feet is appropriate for the story because the story revolves around a lawless scientist who made himself invisible. Though invisible, he was as transparent and solid as glass. His feet couldn't be seen, but he could make footprints on the ground, as is mentioned in the initial part of the story. So, this title is actually a metaphor for that invisible scientist. And the story describes how he could make his presence feel, though he couldn't be seen by others. Whether man made science or science made man is debatable. But if man misuses science, then it can lead to challenges. The story gives a message that mishandling scientific advantages and its great discoveries can make even a brilliant scientist like Griffin a threatening, lawless person. So, this story teaches us that science is our friend, not our foe. Hence, use it rationally. That's all in this session. We are now coming to the end. But before I go, I will show you the summary and question answers related to this chapter. And I'll definitely see you again in my new video with a new topic. Till then, take good care of yourself, of everyone else. Thank you, and God bless you.